With excitement for Reaper of Souls building, there's quite a few players coming back to Diablo 3, myself among those people, and a lot of these people are finding themselves asking the same general question. I've been away from the game for a while, and how do I get back into farming? What's the best routes? What's the best specs? And how do I gear up my character to best do this? Since I was asking that same question, I did a bunch of research and talked to some of my subscribers and got some really good advice and have done some testing and found out some pretty cool stuff. So, in this video, I'm going to share that with you guys. G'day, ZiggyD here, and in this video I'm going to be giving you guys a high MP farming spec for the Demon Hunter. I'll be giving you guys a farming route and tips for clearing that route, and some general gearing advice to get the most out of your Demon Hunter and prepare for Reaper of Souls. So, let's first talk about what we're actually farming for with Reaper of Souls. Still a little bit away, still quite a few months away at least. But generally, we're primarily farming for Paragon XP for the new Paragon system coming in Reaper of Souls. When Reaper of Souls drops, we're going to be getting account-wide Paragon bonuses. And these are going to extend a little bit further beyond the current MF, Gold Find, and basic stat bonuses. We're also going to be able to select cool things like crit chance, move speed, attack speed, and a bunch of other stuff to really customize how our characters play. Now, if you are planning on continuing with your current characters, and obviously if you're planning on farming with them, that's going to be something you're doing, then farming up your Paragon experience now is going to help you out when Reaper of Souls does drop. So the main thing we're going for is Paragon XP. However, we are also looking for decent gear to sell to save up some gold. Remember, there's going to be no auction house in Reaper of Souls, and some demonic essences to do some crafting when the expansion pack drops as well. So on that note, the list of things I tend to pick up these days when I'm farming is pretty small. Mostly demonic essences, legendaries, rings, amulets, and gloves, and that's pretty much about it. Everything else is covered now by crafting, or most legendaries are best in slot for a lot of these other slots. So we just stick with the gloves, because even if they roll lower stats, as long as you get your crit damage and attack speed, they can still be worth quite a bit of money on the auction house. So now let's talk a bit about the spec. This Demon Hunter spec is designed to let you farm the highest efficient monster power for your gearing level. Now, I've played quite a few different specs on my Demon Hunter, and I'm moderate to okay gear, I would say. I'm around the 200 DPS mark, something like 50 to 60k life. And with this spec, I've been able to do between monster power 5 and 7 pretty efficiently. So, this spec is designed to get the most out of your gear, to really squeeze the effectiveness out of it, because I was pretty much on this same set farming MP1 before, and only really doing that efficiently. If I tried to go to MP3, I was struggling. However, once I picked up this spec after getting some useful advice from some subscribers, I've had much better success in much higher MPs, and that's why I'm pretty excited to bring this guide to you guys. So, let's first talk about the passives, because some of the skills revolve around those. The first one is Night Stalker. Night Stalker gives us a bunch of discipline return. Since we get a lot of crits with this spec, we get quite a lot of return. And because we also use Bowler Shot, which is one of the best skills for synergy with Night Stalker, we get a lot of discipline black. And Night Stalker pretty much takes care of all of our discipline needs, gives us plenty of defensive capability. Perfectionist helps us out with tanking and also helps with discipline a little bit as well. The 10% extra life, armor, and all resist from Perfectionist is pretty massive. It makes a really big difference. And then for extra damage, we use archery, or if you're using a one-handed crossbow, so depending on the gearing you end up getting, it'll also give you crit chance, which helps out quite a bit with Night Stalker as well. But even if you're using two-handed crossbow like myself, the extra damage is still pretty handy. So now let's move on to skills. Bowler Shot with Thunderball will be your hatred generator. However, it's not a skill you use too much. Thunderball works really well to return discipline. It has one of the highest proc coefficients for Night Stalker. And this is kind of a hidden mechanic that I didn't actually know about until recently either. But through the Night Stalker passive, we can get a ton of extra discipline through use with Thunderball. Now, it also provides some stun, which is handy against elites, and since you only really use Bowler Shot when you're in a tight situation, when you're like out of discipline, out of hatred, that stun can be pretty helpful. So mainly, we only use this skill for a few seconds when our hatred or discipline are empty. Our main DPS skill is Rapid Fire with Bombardment. This skill gives huge DPS. I had no idea how good this skill was. It was buffed, somewhat recently, and people are starting to realize how good it is, and a lot of high MP farming Demon Hunters are using this as their main attack now. It also has a small AoE field at the point of contact, which is pretty significant because it allows you to actually use it on trash mobs instead of as a single target attack like most rapid fires are. Now, this skill with Bombardment downs both trash mobs and elites very quickly. It's one of the highest DPS, single target DPS skills you can get, and since it's also AoE, it's a small AoE, but it's enough to hit like 3, 4, 5, 6 clustered mobs pretty effectively, so really huge amounts of DPS you can put out with this skill. Shadow Power with Gloom we use before starting Rapid Fire, and as long as you use it before you start Rapid Fire, you will maintain the life leech for the entire duration that you Rapid Fire without interruption. This is essentially called snapshotting, and it's a technique used by a few different skills in the game, and basically, generally, if you have some sort of buff and you use a skill that continues, like it's a constant skill, you will keep that buff until you stop using that skill. So this works really well with Rapid Fire. Now, with the high DPS of Rapid Fire, Shadow Power gives us insane sustain. You'll notice I'm standing in this video that I'm standing in Desecration, Molten, multiple Arcane Lasers without any problems as long as I continue to hit enemies. As soon as I'm not shooting enemies with Rapid Fire, those Desecration dots will kill me pretty much instantly. But as long as I've got that sustain from the Rapid Fire, my tanking ability on this Demon Hunter, even with pretty mediocre gear, is pretty insane. I can tank like MP8, MP9, although it's not efficient, I can actually tank that and stay alive from most attacks. So that's pretty impressive, that combination of skills. It will take some time for you to get used to the snapshotting technique and to really get it down pat, but you'll know you're not doing it right when you attack enemies and your health keeps going down. If it's not staying at full, then you've probably done it wrong, because the life leech is significantly large, and if your life's not full, then you've done it wrong, and you need to stop rapid firing and then start rapid firing again after you first use Shadow Power. Now, I use Caltrops with Bait the Trap as my next skill. Some people use Volt to increase their farming speed instead, but I really like Caltrops with Bait the Trap for people that don't have insane gear. If you have insane gear, your crit chance is probably going to be something like 70%, and Caltrops with Bait the Trap only has diminished effectiveness then, since the cap on crit chance is 75%. But I use Caltrops with Bait the Trap for the 10% extra crit buff. Now, I also use this the same way as I use Gloom. I drop it just before I start firing with Rapid Fire, and then snapshot the bonus 10% crit chance. Since crit helps us with Night Stalker passive as well as with damage, it's a pretty big buff overall. That 10% crit really helps out. The way I use Shadow Power and Caltrops is I basically hit my 1 and 2 buttons at the same time, and then start firing my Rapid Fire a split second later, and this seems to be working out really well for me. It's a big DPS increase. It gives me something like it gives me about 10 to 15% extra damage, even though it's only a 10% crit buff, because I have quite a bit of crit damage. So you might get mixed results compared to that, but overall it's a pretty big buff either way. Next skill I use is Sentry with Guardian Turret. This gives a lot of extra tankiness and a little bit of added DPS. I basically pop this skill just after I start rapid firing, because I believe that Sentry also benefits from the 10% crit buff from Caltrops if you use it while you have the buff. It kind of snapshots as well. I don't believe Sentry can get lifesteal though. I think only the Tormented Chains Sentry can get lifesteal, so that won't work, but I'm pretty sure the crit buff does. And then finally, Bat Companion, pretty simple for the extra hatred regen, which helps us sustain rapid fire for longer, and the longer we can rapid fire, the longer we can stay alive and down those elite packs pretty effectively. So, just as a bit of an overview for the spec and how you use it, basically you want to run up to a large pack, round them up a little bit, try and make the pack as large as possible, then pop Shadow Power and Caltrops at the same time, drop your Sentry and start firing on the biggest cluster or most dangerous enemy. So you're pretty much doing this all in a split second. You hit 1 and 2 at the same time, and directly after, start holding down your click or your rapid fire and drop the Sentry at the exact same time as you start attacking. You just have to make sure you get those Caltrops and Shadow Power Gloom down first. And make sure you're always firing on as many mobs as possible, because this will help you out with life leech from your initial Shadow Power, as long as you keep that snapshotted. And you'll be able to survive through pretty much anything as long as you're firing on a couple mobs at a time with that ability. If a mob happens to knock you back or otherwise interrupts your rapid fire, then make sure to reuse Shadow Power and Caltrops before you start up again. If you run out of hatred in the middle of the fight, then just run back a little bit, start firing with Bowl Shot for a few seconds, and it's a good idea to pop Shadow Power again here as well. And then until you're full again, you'll fill up your hatred really quickly with Bowler, and you'll also fill up your discipline pretty quickly after a few explosions from it. Overall, it's a super effective spec, and it's also pretty fun to actually be able to do high monster powers on a Demon Hunter, which is something I didn't even believe possible before. So now, let's jump into the farming run. It's pretty simple. We're doing Act 1, probably one of the most efficient zones to farm now overall for Paragon experience, and I'm really happy about that. I really love Act 1, so I'm glad they buffed it out so much, and the new mob density buff makes a huge difference to farming in this zone. So firstly, we start off by going to the Festering Woods. Our main goal in here is to build up a fast 3 to 5 Nephilim Valor stacks. When farming high monster power trash mobs, having those 5 stacks as soon as possible makes a really big difference to your overall XP income, so that's why we go to Festering Woods. Otherwise, it's not a particularly great zone in my opinion, but for building up those stacks, it's pretty hard to argue against. There are 2 guaranteed elites in each of the mini dungeons in this zone, so make sure you clear those, kind of aim for those first, and you'll also find 1 to 3 more outside. If you happen to see an event as well, there's an event on the hill, and I think there's another type of event in here, make sure you do it because it's an easy stack. Basically just start fighting some things around there, activate the event, and just keep fighting mobs in that area, and you'll eventually finish the event at the same time as well, and get an easy stack. Since our main goal in here is just to get stacks, skip most of the trash mobs, and just kill the really juicy packs, like the really big packs of bats and things like that. Round up big packs, and skip over like 2 and 3 mobs that by themselves. Once you've cleared this Festering Woods zone either completely, or if you get 5 stacks, whichever comes first, then go back to town and take the waypoints to the Fields of Misery. Clear the majority of the mobs from Fields of Misery, and enter any dungeons besides the Khazra Den. Most dungeons now seem to have excellent mob density, but the Khazra Den as a quest dungeon doesn't really seem worth it to me. So I think there's 2 random dungeons that can spawn in this zone, and both of them are really good besides the Khazra Den, so just skip that one. You can identify the Khazra Den easily by looking for the blue light around it from that the Fallen Sword piece that goes in there in that quest. Now this is a pretty decent XP zone. You're not just getting elites here, there's a good amount of trash mobs, and you can even kill the Key Warden for the occasional key drop if you'd like for some reason. Next up, once the majority of the Fields of Misery are clear, portal back to town and take the waypoint, this time to the Cemetery of the Forsaken. From the cemetery, we're going to skip through this zone, head straight down and out the gate into the Weeping Hollow, one of the best XP zones in the game now. We saved the best for last. Clear this zone and any dungeons that spawn in here. You're pretty much going to clear it entirely, just skipping over packs of 1 or 2 zombies. I'll give you a few extra tips for clearing this zone though. Ignore the grave areas to the north when you first come in from the cemetery side. There's 1 set of graves to the left and 1 set of graves to the right, and these only ever contain a few scripted zombies that will rise up when you walk near them. Nowhere near the mob density, to make it worth it, hanging around for those zombies to appear. So basically just run straight past that. I like to come down from the cemetery and cut right and then go straight down. So yeah, avoid that area or it'll just cut into your XP per hour. And then whenever you see the retching cadavers, they're basically the lady zombies that vomit other zombies. Try and leave them alive until they at least spew 1 extra pack of zombies. And this will help you get a little bit of extra XP from those and buff up the pack a little bit. Pretty nice stuff. I don't believe you continue to get XP after that first vomit pack, but you do definitely get XP from that first vomit pack, so it's worthwhile waiting for that. So next up, I just want to talk about selecting the right monster power. Now, the best way to do this is simply to compare a few runs on different monster powers around about your gearing level, which I'll talk about in the gearing section, and then just find out which one gives the highest XP per hour. The difference is often pretty big as well with this spec. I find it's super efficient at the correct MP, but if you're not farming on the correct MP, then it's going to be very inefficient. So for example, for myself and my own test runs, and there could be a little bit of variation in this, but I did MP5 and MP7 and only got about 65 to 70 million XP per hour, which is pretty bad. And then I did MP6, so in between those two, and I got a pretty decent 116 million XP per hour, which is not bad compared to my Demon Hunter. It's about on par, maybe a little bit better, what I was farming on MP1. And since on MP6 we're getting a bunch of extra magic find, this is clearly well worth it, because we're getting the exact same to better XP per hour and bonus magic find, so well worth doing. Not to mention it's a lot more fun farming on higher monster powers, I think. To make it easy for you guys to calculate which monster power is best for you, I'll link to an XP calculator spreadsheet that you can just make a copy of in the description to use for yourself. Just time your total run, like start a timer right at the very beginning, and then stop it at the end. Just write down your start and end XP, and then put those into the relevant fields in the spreadsheet document, and it'll give you your XP per hour. And you pretty much just want to go with the highest, basically. So now, let's move into gearing, and I'll jump in game and I'll talk about gearing for you guys, and that'll also help you figure out where to start looking for your correct MP. Alright, so for gearing, I'm just going to take you guys through my set and give some general recommendations. I'm not going to go through the complete set building process on the auction house. There's a ton of really good budget build auction house guides out there, and I actually highly recommend Shinobi on YouTube. He did a really good Demon Hunter one that I actually checked out a while back, and helped me improve my gear set quite a bit. But in terms of my gearing level, I'm around the 200k DPS mark now, and I have about 60k life, and my armor is okay, and my all resists are pretty low overall, I think, about the 400 mark. And this is about the right amount, depending on your exact combination of stats, to do between MP 5 and 7. So if your Demon Hunter looks comparable to mine, then you should be looking between 5 and 7 and testing those MPs to find your most efficient MP. But if you're slightly higher, then maybe you want to look at 7 to 8. You know, if you're around the 300k to 400k DPS mark, that's when you should start looking at MP 8 to 10. But pretty much otherwise, most people I think are going to be looking somewhere between MP 5 and 7, I think is efficient for most Demon Hunters, because it starts to get a bit more expensive to move into the 300k DPS mark. But in general, to build a set pretty similar in effectiveness to mine, around $5 to $10 worth of gold on the auction house, so it's 150 to 300 million gold at the moment, but these numbers will change in the future, of course, and just wanted to give you guys a general idea. So I'm using the Manticore, but it's probably worthwhile getting a good one-handed crossbow with a socket on this build. The reason I'm using the Manticore is because it's I've just happened to have a really good one-socket one that has a really good DPS and you know, a bit of vitality and stuff like that on it. It's pretty good, and it would cost me a lot to get a comparable one-hander, so I'm not bothering with that. You pretty much always want to run a Dead Man's Legacy as your quiver. Just in general, not too much else to say about weapons, just go for a socket. If you go for a one-hander, use a red gem instead for the damage buff, unless you have absurdly high crit chance. If you have like 70% crit chance, you're better off running crit damage. Otherwise, you're probably going to be running an average damage red ruby gem in there. Now, in terms of the quiver, Dead Man's Legacy is always the answer. Go for one with as high dexterity and vitality as much as you can. You want pretty good survivability on this sort of spec, and high attack speed is also good. I managed to get a 20% one here, which was pretty cheap actually. This was about 20 million, I think. Hatred regen, that doesn't matter too much. Crit chance, try and get as high as possible. Crit chance is very important for this, and if you can, try and get a rapid fire one with about 5% crit chance on it, which I happen to get. Makes a really big deal because the main crit chance you're getting is from rapid fire, and that's going to help you out with Night Stalker and just do a ton of extra damage. I also recommend going for a socket on the Dead Man's Legacy if you can, because that extra dexterity gives you a big boost. Next up, we're looking at the inners set. We've got a two-piece inners set here because we want that 130 extra dexterity. Your pants give you that extra move speed as well that we're not getting from Lacunis. So in addition to our 12% from boots, we get the full 24% for pretty much reaching the cap there. Inners Temperance is a really good damage boost as well for pants. They're pretty strong. Inners Vast Expanse is a very nice defensive piece, but prior to this, I had what was it, Natalia's chest piece, but this was a significant upgrade for me, and pretty cheap overall. In terms of helmet, I recommend going for an Endariel's Visage. As you can see, I got this one here, it just dropped for me, but these are pretty cheap and very effective in terms of DPS, and you're going to get pretty decent survivability ones as well. I just happen to be using a Emperor of Twilight at the moment, because it's one I bought quite a while ago, and it's still better than most Endariels I would be able to get my hands on. In terms of shoulders, you're pretty much going to be going for rare shoulders, and eventually trying to craft your own ones. They're going to be a lot better. I just happen to have Vile Woods because I bought them before the Archon account-bound crafting came into the game. And generally on this, you want to go for dexterity, vitality, especially going dexterity on the crafted shoulders, and get some all resistance and armor if possible. So you're mostly just going for your survivability stats on here, and as much dexterity as you can get if possible. Pretty basic stuff. In terms of gloves, you want crit chance and crit damage, and then dexterity can roll pretty high on gloves as well, so try and get that. If you have to not get any defensive stats on your gloves whatsoever, I have quite a few on this pair, but if you have to not get any to be able to get a high crit chance and crit damage and dexterity combo, then that's worthwhile doing it. You can get a pretty cheap set of gloves that just has those three stats and not any vitality. For example, this has no vitality on it, so it was pretty cheap. Braces is pretty similar story. You want to get 6% crit chance for maxing it out, and then whatever other combination of dexterity and defensive stats you can get. All resist on braces starts to get really expensive if you've also got crit chance, so look for things like dexterity, intelligence, or strength combinations, maybe some armor, and I happen to get vitality on this, which is pretty nice as well. So in terms of our next set, we've got these two Natalia items here. Natalia's Reflection, which you can get a pretty decent one of these. You know, this is a nice item even just by itself, and we get an extra crit chance when we combine it in the set, and these are pretty cheap as well. Natalia's Bloody Footprints is the second part of that set, and I recommend trying to go for Golden Health Pickup Radius on this as your extra stat. They have one random stat that you can get, and Pickup Radius, you need a little bit of this. It can be pretty helpful to have, so I try and go for it here if possible. You can also get it on the Inner's Temperance if you want, but I think I got Armor on this one instead for extra survivability. And then the next item we're looking at is Witching Hour. I pretty much recommend Witching Hour. If you have this combination of the two Inners items and the two Natalia's items here, Witching Hour is perfect. Otherwise, you're going to be going for an Inners belt in a different sort of set. But this combination of legendary items here, basically all of these here, works really, really well together. So the two Nats, the two Inners, and then the Witching Hour. Witching Hour gives us crit damage, you know, on a belt, pretty sweet, attack speed, and all that good jazz, pretty good stuff. On your amulet, you're going to want to try and get crit chance and crit damage, obviously, but vitality is one that people don't think about too much, but you can get a lot of vitality on amulets really cheap, so try and get as much here as possible. Remember, you want to try and get your vitality up. I think, yeah, 1200 is probably a pretty good number to aim for. That's about what I've got. Somewhere between, you know, around 3k, 12 to 1500 vitality is really nice. 60k, I'm able to survive pretty well. In terms of benchmarking your actual gear, before I just move on, the other ring, pretty standard stuff. Try and get some crit chance something. I recommend getting a rare ring for here. There's other unique items you can get, and you can run a Hellfire if you want, but I recommend getting just a good rare ring for that second ring slot there. Now, in terms of benchmarking your gear set, there's pretty much one thing you want to be able to test to see if it's going to work well in this high MP farming. Basically, go to Fields of Misery and try and tank a hit from one of those charging bulls. If you can tank 1 to 2 hits of those in really rapid succession, without, you know, while still having, so say you take one hit and it takes you around to halfway or a little bit further, that's good. You can survive that. Your life leech is really fast. As long as you can tank that one big hit, you're fine. And that's pretty much the only other one. The only other benchmark you can do is in the Weeping Hollow, which is the one down from Cemetery of the Forsaken, and try and tank one of the exploding fatties. If you can tank one of their explosions, then you're pretty good to go. That's all you need in terms of survivability to be able to do this with this spec. And DPS, as I said, around 200k will put you at between MP5 and MP7. Anyway, hopefully you guys have found this helpful. I've been having a lot of fun farming a bit better on high MP with my Demon Hunter. And all you guys that are getting back into the game for a Reaper of Souls, I hope this helps you. Anyway, I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching. Gold and gear inflation is pretty huge at the moment, so it's going to be really cheap if you want to prepare and get back into the game ready for Reaper of Souls. If you do want to go the not farming crazy amount and instead just throw a couple dollars at the game, I think maybe like $3 to $5 per class will be enough to get you up and running, good enough to get into Reaper of Souls. And actually, I don't recommend spending more than that. I don't recommend getting MP10 gear for your character unless you want to go uber hardcore, because